Hey guys, today's story is a little different. It's about what happens when your own family teaches you, over and over again, that you are just a background character in their perfect little story. I'm Eric, 36 years old, and I run a creative agency in Chicago that works with jazz musicians and theater houses. Kind of poetic, you'll see why. Growing up, I wasn't the golden child, or even the silver one. I was the one they called responsible, which is just family code for forgettable. Birthdays, holidays, even family photos, they'd always leave me out or crop me halfway. But the moment that broke me wasn't a childhood slight. It was the night my own mother, on her birthday, looked across a candlelit ballroom and decided I was worth no more than a seat by the swinging kitchen doors. And if you think karma's slow, wait until you hear this. So, before you get pulled in, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually believe that betrayal always comes back around. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and if you've ever been left out by the people who are supposed to know you best. Now sit back, let the room go quiet, and let me tell you how it really went down. The invitation came in the mail. Not even a call or a text. A gold foil envelope with my name, Eric D. Weston, typed in a small font, almost like they were trying to hide it. Inside was a formal card. Please join us for Susan Weston's 60th birthday celebration. Black tie. The Glenview Manor Ballroom. And then, in the corner, hosted by her children. Children. Plural. I was one of them. Technically. But that line read more like a cruel joke. Because I already knew how this night would go. My brother Adam, the surgeon, would give a toast, shaking his glass and listing off all of Mom's accomplishments like he was reading a eulogy for a saint. My sister Katie would probably arrive in a designer gown with her latest startup's PR crew behind her, casually bragging about her angel investors. And me? I'd be the one people would lean toward and ask, "And what is it you do again?" Like I didn't just land 3 Grammy-winning artists as clients last quarter. I stood over the trash can with the invitation for longer than I should have. I thought about not going. I really did. But then I remembered the song. The one thing, just one that ever belonged to just me and Mom. A jazz lullaby she sang when I was little, when I had nightmares or couldn't sleep during the storms. Summer's Prayer, it was called. I used to hum it when I was scared. Or invisible. And for one sliver of time, it made me feel seen. Loved. Safe. I made a phone call. 2, actually. One to a friend who owed me a favor with a certain jazz ensemble. Another to someone at Glenview Manor, where I had some history, more than they knew. The plan began to take shape. Quiet. Precise. The kind of revenge that doesn't burn bridges, it just builds a whole new road they don't get to walk on. The day of the party came. I wore a sharp midnight blue suit, not tuxedo level flashy, but enough to make people second guess who they thought I was. When I arrived, the valet took my keys without making eye contact. At the entrance, a young woman with a clipboard squinted at the guest list, scanned past my name like it was a smudge on the page, then smiled tightly. "Oh yes, Eric, you're with the, auxiliary seating." I followed her past the golden walls and chandeliers, deeper into the room, then around to the far edge of the ballroom. There it was. A small table with a crooked candle, set just beside the kitchen double doors. From where I sat, I could hear the clatter of dishes, the bark of the chef shouting for service. No one came to greet me. No one pulled me into a hug. They knew I was there. Katie even looked over and nodded like I was a service staffer she vaguely recognized. I sat quietly. I sipped my drink. I watched the spectacle. Waiters flowing in waves, trays of canapes lifted high, laughter ringing from the head table where Mom sat, beaming beneath a floral arch. Adam gave his toast. It was everything I expected. He quoted Maya Angelou and somehow made it about himself. Katie chimed in with a few words about legacy, and empowered women. Then came the part where they handed Mom a photo collage, childhood memories, family vacations, old black and white shots of her and my father. I wasn't in a single one. But I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Because my moment hadn't started yet. At precisely 8:47 p.m., as dessert was being cleared, the lights shifted. Soft blue, like twilight. The jazz ensemble took the stage. A hush fell across the room. People turned, murmuring. This wasn't on the program. And then it started. A lone trumpet. Low, haunting. The first few notes of Summer's Prayer. I didn't move. I didn't stand or wave or announce a thing. I simply watched. As every head turned toward the music. Toward the moment. Toward me. And in that breath, I became the center of a story they thought they'd written without me. My mother's smile wavered the moment she recognized the melody. It was subtle, just a flicker in her eyes, a shift in posture. But I saw it. Summer's Prayer wasn't some song pulled from a playlist. It was a ghost from her past, a memory she hadn't invited but couldn't ignore. Her hand went to her chest, almost instinctively, and for the first time that evening, she looked around the room like she'd misplaced something important. Something fragile. The ensemble kept playing. The lead saxophonist, a good friend of mine from back in the day, stepped forward with a solo that seemed to bleed through the walls. There was a weight to every note, like the song wasn't just being played but remembered. Relived. And slowly, the room quieted. Conversations faded. Forks rested on plates. Eyes drifted from the floral arrangements and the crystal chandeliers to the musicians. And then, to me, I didn't need to speak. The music said enough. For years, I tried to prove I mattered. Tried to be louder, sharper, more successful. But now, all I had to do was sit still. It was the most visible I'd ever been in a room full of people who never truly saw me. Katie tilted her head, squinting through the candlelight like she was seeing a glitch in the scene. I watched her mouth the words, "Is that Eric?" to Adam, who glanced my way and blinked twice, first with confusion, then recognition, then a slow, dawning discomfort. I almost laughed. All those years they called me the quiet one. The weird one. The underachiever. Meanwhile, they had no idea I'd built something quietly brilliant. My agency wasn't flashy, but it was respected. The artists I worked with weren't pop stars, they were legends in their own right. People who understood that timing, emotion, and story could move more than just charts, they could move people. The song finished, and the band held the last note just long enough to let the silence sink in. Then the room erupted in polite applause. Some guests looked around, unsure of what they just experienced. Others clapped hesitantly, trying to match the mood. But my mother, she sat frozen. Her hands were on her lap. Her gaze locked on me. I nodded once, calm and deliberate. That was my toast. No glass raised. No speech prepared. Just the truth, wrapped in melody. Then I stood up. I didn't rush. I didn't fumble or stumble or look for someone's approval. I walked the length of the ballroom, past faces I recognized but didn't care about. Past relatives who used to ask if I was still trying that music thing. I moved like I was walking through a film I'd seen before, knowing every line, every cue, every exit. And I stopped at her table. My mother's. She blinked at me, unsure of what to say. Katie reached out, probably to interrupt, to make it less awkward. But I didn't give her the chance. I booked the band, I said. Quiet but steady. They're from the Chicago Jazz Cooperative. We've been working together for a few years. Adam looked like he'd swallowed a pebble. Katie just stared. I remember this song, Mom finally said, her voice like brittle paper. I used to sing it to you, You did, I replied. And it meant everything. The silence stretched. It wasn't dramatic. Just honest. Then I turned and walked toward the front of the ballroom where the actual VIP section was set. Because I hadn't just brought the band. I'd also sponsored the entire event. The ballroom, the catering, the custom lighting. All of it had quietly been underwritten by my agency. But I let them think they planned it. Let them believe the illusion. Because sometimes, the best kind of revenge is the one no one sees coming until it's already happened. And when I reached the head table, the one with the nameplate that read, "Event Sponsor," I pulled out the chair. My chair. The one I'd reserved for myself. A staff member approached with a fresh drink and a small nod. "Mr. Weston," she said, "your dinner is ready." I sat down and looked out across the room. And for once, no one dared to pretend I didn't belong. The rest of the night unfolded like a surreal dream. People whispered, leaning over their champagne flutes. Distant cousins made awkward detours to suddenly say hello. Old aunts I hadn't seen in years complimented the decor, suddenly so curious where Mom had found such a stunning venue. But I didn't gloat. I didn't rub it in. That wasn't the point. The point was never to make them feel small. It was to make myself whole. And in that golden-lit ballroom, surrounded by people who once treated me like an afterthought, I finally felt it. Not power. Not triumph. But peace. Growing up, I was the placeholder. The default. The one they called when someone else canceled. I wasn't the problem child, but I wasn't the golden one either. I was just there. The invisible middle son in a family obsessed with appearances. My older brother, Jason, was the golden boy. Ivy League, law school, married young, 2 perfect kids. My younger sister, Katie? Beauty queen turned entrepreneur with a lifestyle blog and a 6-figure following. Then there was me, Eric, the musician. Or as Dad called it, the one still playing with hobbies. It wasn't always like that. I remember being 5 and singing in the back seat of my mom's car, her smiling into the mirror while humming along. Back then, she loved my voice. Said it reminded her of her own father. But somewhere along the line, that affection turned into polite tolerance. When I got serious about music, they stopped asking about my work. Holidays became tighter. Conversations more surface level. My updates were met with, "That's nice, honey," while Katie's latest product launch or Jason's bonus triggered champagne toasts. I learned to expect nothing. Birthday cards with no personal messages. Group texts that somehow forgot to include me. And then this party. Her 70th. I didn't even get a phone call. Just an email forwarded by one of the assistants managing logistics. It wasn't even addressed to me directly. Just a generic invite. Hope to see you there. No seat assignment. No family recognition. Like they wanted plausible deniability if I didn't show up. As if they'd say, "Oh, we thought he wasn't coming. He's always so busy with music." I showed up anyway. Because deep down, I still cared. Still hoped that maybe this time would be different. That maybe this was the moment they'd finally see me not as the quiet background noise but as someone who built something from silence. Of course, that wasn't what happened. When I arrived, one of the staff handed me a program with a list of the evening's events. Dinner. Speeches. Live music. But as I scanned the guest layout, my name wasn't on the primary family tables. I approached the desk, trying to stay calm. "Hi, I'm Eric Weston. I think I'm on the list?" The young woman looked through her tablet. "Oh, yes, Mr. Weston. You're with the auxiliary staff table." I blinked. "Excuse me?" She hesitated, glancing nervously at the line behind me. It looks like you've been placed with the servers. It might be a mistake, I can double-check? But I shook my head. No need. I knew exactly what this was. A message. A reminder. In their eyes, I wasn't family. I was background. A technicality. I took my seat. As trays of hors d'oeuvres floated past, I kept my back straight, my expression unreadable. Around me, the clink of silverware and laughter filled the room. My siblings toasted each other with inside jokes. My mother made a speech about gratitude and legacy, tears in her eyes, pride in her voice. She never once looked in my direction. But I'd already made my move. Months before, when I'd discovered the venue and quietly secured the headline band. When I'd negotiated to become the anonymous sponsor. When I'd given the conductor that one special instruction. Open with this song. Don't announce it. Just play it, exactly as I send it. Let it speak. And it had. When the first note of Summer's Prayer drifted out, it was like my younger self was speaking. The version of me she used to rock to sleep. The little boy she once held, before expectations and favoritism pushed us apart. That melody wasn't just music, it was memory. And it cracked something in her. After the song, when she turned to look for me and realized where I'd been placed next to the bussers, across from the emergency exit, something changed in her eyes. It was the first time in years she looked like she understood what she'd done. But I didn't move. I stayed at my table. Because this wasn't about being rescued. This was about letting her sit with the weight of her choices. Later in the evening, she approached. Her heels tapped across the marble floor with cautious rhythm. She stood across from me for several seconds before speaking. I didn't realize. You were the sponsor, she said quietly. You weren't supposed to, I replied. A beat passed. That song, she added. I hadn't heard it in years. I know. She folded her hands. You always were the sentimental one. No, I said. I just remember things others try to forget. She nodded, not with agreement, but with acknowledgement. The kind you give when you realize too late that something irreversible has occurred. That moment wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It was the closest thing we'd ever shared to a true conversation. And it was enough. There's something about silence that speaks louder than rage. After that brief exchange with my mother, she didn't say another word. She walked back to her table with the grace of someone who knew the cameras were still on, even if the story had already shifted. I watched as she rejoined my siblings, who were mid-toast over some family memory I wasn't part of. My name wasn't on their lips. Not yet. But I knew it would be by the end of the night. The jazz band played through the remainder of their first set, smooth and forgettable, save for the note of tension lingering in the air. I could feel her eyes on me from across the room occasionally, briefly but never long enough for anyone else to notice. Like she was trying to place a puzzle piece that had been sitting in plain sight all along. The servers I'd been seated with? They were kind. Polite. Better company, honestly. One of them, an older gentleman named Marcus, gave me a nod as he cleared a tray. That song you played? That was for her, right? I just smiled. He added, hit her like a freight train. That was the first moment all night I truly felt seen. I watched the next set begin, each song more lavish than the last, until just before dessert when everything went silent. The MC walked up to the mic to announce a Saprizia live rendition of one of the matriarch's most treasured songs, a gift from a mystery patron. That wasn't my cue. Not yet. But I knew what was coming. The lights dimmed, the room hushed, and the band launched into an instrumental that hadn't been played publicly in 20 years. I composed it when I was 19, fresh off my first heartbreak, trying to make sense of the chaos that was family, love, and the vacuum of expectations. I never released it. Only one copy ever existed in a burned CD I once gave to my mother for her birthday. She kept it in a drawer and never mentioned it again. Until now. It began with a single piano chord. Then strings joined, building gradually, each bar a reminder of my existence, of what she tried to ignore. The room was silent, eyes wide, but hers welled up. This wasn't a song played for applause. It was a mirror. At some point, Jason leaned over to her and whispered something. Katie looked confused. The guests exchanged glances. The music said everything I never dared to. Every note was my biography, the parts they skipped, the wounds they glossed over with. He's just sensitive. When the song ended, the silence afterward was almost holy. And then, a single line broke in my voice, pre-recorded, coming through the speakers. "Happy birthday, Mom." From the son who learned to sing in the silence. Gasps rippled through the room. No one moved. My siblings turned to me in slow unison, like ghosts being summoned. And there I sat, still at the server's table, wine untouched, eyes steady. Jason stood first. He walked toward me, confusion written all over his face. "You did that?" he asked. I nodded. "For her?" "No," I said. "For me." He looked shaken. Not angry, just undone. Like he'd seen me for the first time in years and wasn't quite sure how I'd gotten so tall. Katie came next. She hugged me. She actually hugged me. She whispered, "That was beautiful." I almost believed it. Almost. But the one who didn't move? My mother. She stayed in her chair, staring at the space where the band had just played. And I realized something. This wasn't about payback. It was about proof. I didn't want to humiliate her. I just wanted her to know that I had built something. That despite the silence, despite the exile, I had created beauty. Without their applause. Without their permission. Eventually, the room resumed. People clapped, awkwardly at first. Some came by to say kind things. A few old relatives even admitted they didn't know I was that Eric. The one who composed music for films. The one with the modest awards, the streaming royalties, the global fans. Funny how that part never made the Christmas newsletters. As the party wound down, I helped Marcus clear a few glasses. He laughed and said, "You're the only guest who offered." That tells me everything. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe I just needed the silence." On the way out, I passed Mom. She finally stood. "You could have told me," she said quietly. "I did," I answered. "You just didn't listen." She didn't argue. Didn't cry. Didn't collapse into apology. She just nodded, the kind of nod you give when something's too late but still true. And in that moment I realized I didn't need her validation anymore. I'd already taken the stage. My song had already played. The days after the party blurred together like smudged ink on a page I was finally ready to rewrite. I didn't go home that night with anger or bitterness. I went home with clarity. For the first time in years, I had stopped trying to earn something that was never mine to chase acceptance on someone else's terms. I woke up the next morning with my phone flooded, texts from cousins I hadn't heard from in years, DMs from distant relatives who had apparently followed my career in silence, and voicemails that started with awkward chuckles and ended with, "That was something else, Eric." But the most unexpected message came from Jason. It was short. Just, "Lunch?" Just us. I sat with that for a while. A few years ago, I'd have jumped at the offer. Clung to it like a starving man offered crumbs. But now, I didn't need it. I replied with one word. "Sure." We met at a quiet cafe uptown, away from the spotlight and the echoes of last weekend. He looked different, less polished, more thoughtful. He'd clearly rehearsed whatever he was going to say, but when the waiter left, he ditched the script. "I owe you a few decades," he said. I didn't respond right away. The silence between us used to be a wall. Now it was a window. "I don't want an apology," I said. "I just want you to understand." He nodded. "I think I do. I thought I knew you. But I knew the version of you Mom gave us. The troubled one. The one who was always too much or not enough. That version was easier for everyone," I replied. "Including me." He looked down at his coffee. "I didn't realize how loud silence can be." That line stuck with me. Because it was true. All those years, the silence wasn't peace. It was punishment. Being left out of group texts, forgotten at family dinners, misremembered in stories I was part of. It had a weight. But now, the silence was mine to fill. I had turned it into something melodic. Into something that could be played back in rooms where I'd once been invisible. After lunch, we walked for a while. No forced closure. No big revelations. Just two people sharing the space between what was and what could be. He asked if I'd join him for drinks sometime with a few of our cousins. I said maybe. And for once, I actually meant it. Back at my apartment, I opened a folder on my desk labeled Unplayed. It held sheet music scores I'd written over the years but never performed. Not because they weren't good enough, but because I didn't think I was. I picked one at random. A piece called August Light. It was gentle, intricate, and deeply mine. I started playing it on my keyboard, not for an audience, not for applause, but just for myself. The notes filled the room, each one louder than any insult I'd ever swallowed. Later that week, I got an invitation from the same jazz band that had played at Mom's party. The band leader had reached out through a mutual contact. "Whatever that song was, people haven't stopped asking," the message read. "We'd love to collaborate." It wasn't fame. It wasn't a stage filled with cameras. It was something better, recognition by people who saw craft, not just a name on a family tree. I accepted. We met for rehearsals in an old converted theater downtown. There were echoes in that room, the kind that make every note feel sacred. I brought August Light with me. They played through it once, then again. And by the third time, the drummer paused and said, "Man, this is personal." He wasn't wrong. That night, we recorded a live version. I didn't post it to my socials. I didn't send it to Mom. I just saved it. A version of myself, captured in full sound, no edits. Proof that I existed in color even when they tried to cast me in grayscale. About a month after the birthday dinner, Katie texted. She'd apparently taken up piano lessons with her daughter and asked if I had any beginner-friendly sheet music. I sent her something simple I wrote years ago called Kitchen Seat, a quiet melody based on watching Mom cook while I practiced scales under the hum of the oven fan. She replied, "I remember that song." It was the first time she remembered something that connected us. No sarcasm. No distancing. Just memory. The final loose end came on a random Thursday, in the form of a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A handwritten letter from my mother. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. It read, "Eric." I didn't recognize the song at first. Not because I forgot, but because I never really listened the first time. I was so busy trying to hold everything together that I didn't realize I was letting you slip away. What you did at the party, it was bold. It was painful. It was deserved. I don't know how to fix the years we lost. I don't even know if that's possible. But I heard you. I finally heard you. Love. Mom. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just put the letter in the folder labeled Unplayed next to August Light. Not because I wanted to bury it, but because I finally had a space to hold all the things I once thought had no place. I didn't reply to her letter, not immediately. I let it sit there in the folder for days, weeks maybe. I would take it out sometimes, run my fingers across the paper like I was trying to feel the years I'd missed. But that was the thing about time, it doesn't pause for apologies, no matter how heartfelt. It only gives you the choice to carry what matters and leave the rest behind. The next time I saw my family was during the holidays. Not because I was invited. Not in the usual sense. But because for once, I wasn't asking permission to show up. I'd learned to stop waiting for a seat at someone else's table when I had already earned the right to build my own. It was a chilly afternoon, and I remember pulling into the driveway of my brother's place. The house looked the same as it always had: warm lights, laughter spilling out through the windows, the sound of cutlery clinking against porcelain. But something felt different this time. The weight I used to carry at the threshold wasn't there. I was no longer coming to be accepted. I was coming to be seen. When I walked through the door, no one gasped or froze. There was no dramatic hush or shocked silence. But there was a shift. Subtle. Eyes met mine with something new. Maybe respect. Maybe curiosity. Maybe both. Katie walked up first. She smiled, not wide or dramatic, just enough to say, "I'm glad you came." Her daughter peeked from behind her legs, holding a worn copy of the sheet music I had sent. "Play something for us later?" Katie asked. I nodded. "Sure." Jason gave me a quick nod from across the room. And then Mom appeared, her hands still dusted with flour from whatever she'd been baking. She didn't say anything, just wrapped me in a hug that didn't try to explain everything. It didn't excuse anything either. But it landed different. Like she'd finally stopped hugging the version of me she wanted, and started embracing the one that had always been there. Later that evening, I sat at the piano. It wasn't some grand concert hall, it was a living room with a fireplace crackling in the corner, the scent of cinnamon and pine in the air, and a dog curled up at someone's feet. But for me, it felt bigger than any venue I'd ever dreamed of playing. I played Kitchen Seat first. The simple melody floated through the room, soft and nostalgic. Then I moved into something newer, something I'd been writing lately called Threshold. It started hesitant, almost fragmented, and then built into something whole. A song about returning without needing to explain why you left. When the last note hung in the air, no one clapped. And I was thankful for that. They just listened, really listened, and let the silence afterward be its own kind of reverence. Afterwards, Jason pulled me aside. "You're not the family screw-up," he said quietly. "You never were. I think we just weren't ready to admit how much we needed you to be something less, so we didn't have to deal with how much more you really were." It was the closest thing to a confession I'd ever heard from him. And I accepted it, not because I needed it to heal, but because it felt like we'd both stopped pretending. Mom didn't say much that night. But before I left, she pressed something into my palm. A keychain. It was old, scratched, and definitely used. The same one I'd made her in school when I was 7. I thought she'd thrown it away years ago. But there it was. "I never lost it," she said. "I just forgot how much it mattered." I tucked it into my coat pocket without a word. That night, walking back to my car under the cold glow of porch lights, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt steady. And that was enough. In the weeks that followed, life returned to its rhythms. Studio sessions, emails, collaborations, deadlines. But something had changed. I was no longer carrying the story of rejection on my back, I was composing a new one, in real time. An unexpected email landed in my inbox. A journalist from a national music outlet had stumbled on the recording of August Light. They wanted to feature it in a piece about underrecognized composers with stories rooted in resilience. I agreed. But I didn't tell anyone in my family. Not because I was hiding it, but because I no longer needed their recognition to validate mine. The article dropped with the headline, "The Sound of Becoming, a Composer's Quiet Rebellion," and it opened with a line I'll never forget. Some artists break through with fame. Others, like Eric Langston, cut through silence. I read it once. Then again. Then closed the tab and went back to writing. The final note in all of this didn't come as applause or validation. It came during a quiet dinner alone, a few weeks later, at a restaurant where the lights were low and the jazz was soft. The band struck up something slow and familiar. It was Threshold. I hadn't sent them the sheet music. Turns out Jason had. He was seated across the room, not trying to be noticed. Just there. Not fixing the past. Just sharing the present. I raised my glass. He raised his back. No words. Just acknowledgement. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the screw-up sitting in someone else's shadow. I felt like the composer of my own life. The strange thing about healing is that it rarely arrives with a grand finale. More often, it slips in quietly between the beats of a conversation you didn't expect to matter, in the pause between one song and the next. For so long, I thought closure would come in the form of apology or public acknowledgement. Maybe a speech. Maybe a headline. But what I found instead was something far more enduring, peace in my own voice. The boy who once sat at the kids' table, whose name was left out of introductions, who learned to make room for himself in the silence others left behind, that boy grew up. And he didn't just survive his story. He rewrote it. Not out of spite, but out of truth. Because revenge, when done right, isn't about proving others wrong. It's about living in a way that makes their definitions irrelevant. There was a time I would have given anything just to be accepted. Now I give thanks for the distance that taught me how to stand alone. I've learned that not every family will know how to love you the way you deserve. But that doesn't mean you have to shrink to fit. Sometimes the most radical act is staying whole in a room that never saw your full shape. So if you've ever been the afterthought, the overlooked, the one dismissed with a label you didn't choose, remember this. The most powerful seat in any room is the one you build yourself. And when you play your truth, even the loudest doubters eventually go quiet. Thanks for walking through this one with me.